This is Retire with Purpose, featuring Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial and is a certified financial planner, leading retirement planning professional, as well as a published author. He is a highly sought-after speaker throughout Northeast Indiana. Marshall is the vice president of Howard Bailey Financial and is also a certified financial planner. He is a trusted voice to families all across the tri-state area. This is Retire with Purpose.
Welcome to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weed. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, here with me.
Hey.
And we are here to discuss retirement with you. So if you're at retirement, in retirement, near retirement, or you're just seeking that coveted job optional status, you have found yourself a home. We're going to have a wide-ranging discussion today, talking retirement, of course, but we're going to talk the top retirement fears and how to deal with those things. We're also going to be touching on Medicare later in the show, as well as hitting up on retirement or a third act. What's a third act, a second act, rewirement? What's the definition of retirement today, and how should you change your thinking before you actually get there? And my favorite part of today's show is going to be welcoming John O'Leary. John O'Leary is a #1 New York Times bestselling author and just an overwhelmingly powerful individual in his personal life, in his professional life. He's a giver. He's going to bring a lot of love to the show. So if you're in need of a little love today, I hope you stick around. But off the top, we're going to cover an article from Weekend Reading for Retirees. So every single Friday, we send out 4 articles. These are 4 articles on top trending topics in the retirement planning space. So there's a lot of garbage out there. We help you sift through all that stuff. We narrow it down to 4 articles that we think can help you make better decisions on your way to or during retirement. And if you'd like to sign up to receive these articles, just go to retirewithpurpose.com, scroll on down to Weekend Reading, and first name and email will get you set up, and you'll also receive commentary from me along with those articles. This one comes from The Street, Top Retirement Fears and How to Deal with Them.
Yeah, coming to you from a advisor and physician, Dr. Ken Waltzner has got some topics here where he's dealing with fears, and right out of the gate, Casey says retirement can be scary for a number of reasons. However, individual reactions to these fears vary, and I think that's a great point. I mean, everybody has a different set of biases. We all see the world a little bit differently, and some of these fears really concern some, but others have other things on their mind.
Yeah, everybody's so different. This is why financial planning, it has to be so unique, and the person you're working with has to be so flexible too. They have to be ready to have different types of conversations, have different types of tools, different types of strategies available for every unique individual that they sit down with. And there's been some families, I just got off a call with a family this past week, and he says, hey, I'm excited. There's some good opportunities out there. Let's find them. Let's make some money.
Yeah.
And then there's another discussion I had a couple weeks prior with another family going, hey, are we going to be okay?
Yeah.
And, and not even looking for opportunity, but there's still that sense of fear. Even if you have a plan, I don't think there was an individual in this world that didn't have a little bit of fear. You know, no matter how well they had planned or prepared, this was something that was very difficult for us to plan for, especially psychologically, but a plan can help that. And the author here shares that there's 2 types of people. There's those that are looking at retirement and just delaying facing those fears, and then there's those that have their head in the sand. Now, I think there's a third type, that wasn't delaying facing those fears. They didn't have their head in the sand. They were up, they were learning, and they were figuring out, well, what can I do to make retirement even better and take advantage of the opportunity? So I don't know that there's people that are just putting their head in the sand and delaying things altogether. Yeah. Sure, there's some of that. And of course, we all know that's the worst thing you can possibly do during times of crisis. But that still tends to happen to some. And this author shares with us his experience in working with clients and some of their top fears at this given time, and how he's helping walk them through those different fears, solutions for those different fears.
Yeah, the first one he lists here is running out of money. The first retirement fear most of his clients express is the worry that they will outlive their money, or high expenses or poor market conditions will, decimate their savings over time.
Yeah, and he says, for some, these fears are rational, right? And
yeah,
absolutely.
That's a good point. I think that's a good point.
If you're 100% equities and you just lost your job, those are some serious fears, right? Those fears are very rational. However, He also says even when the data indicates that such fears are unwarranted, that they may nonetheless persist. And this is something that we deal with on a seems like almost daily basis. One of the first things that we'll do when we sit down with a couple is, hey, let's take a look and see if you have enough. And my dad did this for years, sitting in people's living room with him. Every single time we'd sit down, we'd figure out everything that you have, right? We would go through all the statements. We'd go through all the brokerage accounts, the insurance accounts, the bank statements. We'd figure out this is what you have. We'd go through the tax return. We'd take a look at your budget, your expenses. This is what you're spending. And a very simple calculation can give us a pretty good idea of whether you have enough or not. And so many times we'll find that we have a family that's sitting there that's shooting for the moon, thinking they need to get 7 to 10% per year. They've got everything in the market and they're concerned. They have these fears that they don't have enough. And that's why they're taking on this risk. We find that, hey, you could bury this money in the backyard, spend a little bit of it every year. You'll never run out of money. You'll never run out of money. And quite often it's a 2 or 3% rate of return that they need in order to have enough money to last the rest of their lives. But nobody's ever shared that with them because the conversations they've been having with their advisor have been about the market. They've been about growth. They haven't been about preservation and just protecting what we have, making sure it lasts the rest of our life so we don't have to have these fears anymore, because sometimes they are completely unnecessary.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of two different families that come to mind when we're talking about this. One family, even after I showed them several times that they had enough money to live a long life and do the things that they wanted to do, they kept having these fears that they didn't have enough. And so I started talking, like, tell me about growing up. Well, where does this come from? He's like, well, my parents just never had enough. And this was trained to him. It was almost like osmosis that his parents didn't have enough. So it was ingrained in him that he was never going to have enough. And it passes along. Another family I can think of, their social circle, a lot of people aren't prepared for retirement, but they are. But they let those kind of feelings of the group around them influence their mental health when it comes to, do I have enough?
But quite often what I find, as an author said here, you should make room or plan for contingent liabilities. Right? So first step, build a plan. And that might be a very basic plan. Maybe you're sitting down and you're building this plan and showing, hey, yeah, I know I have enough. And quite often we hear, yeah, I have enough unless, and it's these contingent liabilities. It's, well, what if I have an emergency? What if the stock market crashes? What if inflation rears its ugly head? What if the kids need money? What if I have a major healthcare need or a long-term care crisis? What if taxes go up? And this is at the core of our planning, because most of these liabilities, you've thought about them, but you've never planned for them. You've thought about these things, you've never planned for them, but if you get them down on paper, and that's what our planning process does. The Retire with Purpose framework outlines each one of these risks that are definable and allocates your assets to specifically defend against each one of these liabilities. And then we're setting additional funds aside for those things that we can't define, that are totally unexpected, that give us that flexibility to adapt the plan over time.
Yeah. Next up, he talks about out-of-control healthcare costs. Now, this is one that we talk about a lot with retirees. Casey, you've even had some good conversations on the podcast about this same topic.
Yeah, the author shares with us one of the ways to do this is just to build the healthcare costs into the plan and realize that healthcare costs increase as we age, and not only increase as we age, but they increase at a rate that's higher than the average rate of inflation. This is where a lot of financial planners go wrong. They're telling you, hey, you're spending $7,000 a month. We're going to slap a 3% inflation rate on that over the next 20 years. Your expenses, you're going to be spending $14,000 a month when you're 85 years old. That's not what the real research shows. The real research, and we interviewed the top retirement researcher at Morningstar on the Retire with Purpose podcast, and he shared with us his research. There's a lot of expenses. The good bulk of them almost go down over time throughout retirement. We're going through our go, slow go, no go years, so we're not spending as much, especially on those frivolous things when we're 85 versus 65. However, we have to balance that out with healthcare expense inflation, and we see a relatively flat line. I just think we really mess up on healthcare expenses that also throw in, mortgage expenses as well. We'll see advisors throw those things in and inflate a mortgage expense. Well, it's locked in for the next 30 years. It's not going to inflate. We need to pay attention to the details.
He goes on to talk about poor health, health concerns, also requiring long-term care. But the next point I think was interesting, Casey. He talked about not only you needing long-term care, but caring for an elderly parent or other relative. He cites a recent study by the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College, finds that between 10 and 12% of retired individuals are caring for an elderly relative. And this is something that we see almost on a weekly basis in our office.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that frustrated me with this part of the article is he says modeling long-term care in a retirement projection is difficult. Really? Is it really that difficult? If you have the right software, you have all the information at your fingertips, how much the healthcare could cost. I think it's looking at the worst case scenario, and that's where that's where the advisors struggle with. I think the average advisor is just trying to build it into a plan and going, well, the average stay is 2.5 years, and the average cost is $7,000 a month, and it's going to inflate at 4%, and not saying, well, we need to build this plan for worst case scenario. Worst case scenario means that it's going to be $10,000 a month, inflating at 5% a year, and our stay is going to be 4 years. And or then 10. We say, then we need to gauge your comfort with that risk. And many are comfortable taking that risk. If you're not comfortable taking that risk, there are tools out there that do provide unlimited long-term care benefits. So you don't actually have to nail down that it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. There are products that will inflate and give you unlimited long-term care benefits. You just have to have the advisor that has the right tools. If they don't have the right tools, then yeah, it's one heck of a guessing game.
I want to skip ahead. One of the last points is boredom and loss of purpose. Now, this is one topic that I think, from your conversations with George Schoenfield on the podcast, Dr. Robert Delamontagna, you've had this conversation many, many times, and it's a real concern for some.
Yeah. I think this is really this is our whole tagline, right? This is retire with purpose. This is what it's all about. The definition of retirement is changing. People are looking at retirement in a different light. They're looking at it from, I want to live not just, a good life in retirement. I want to live my best life in retirement. And what does that look like? And we need to start planning for this long before we actually get to retirement. I think the best piece of advice in this article on purpose is having a trial retirement. The author recommends that you have a trial retirement. Draw up a sample weekly retirement schedule and then live it for 2 to 3 weeks as a staycation. I don't think that's long enough. Yeah. And a lot of people had staycations throughout the coronavirus.
Yeah, there you go.
So many people got a feeling for what retirement is like, but it's not the same. That's not the right comparison. You were in a time of crisis and you felt safe being home. You wanted to be home. However, what if you want to be out? You want to get out and do things. You want to interact with people. You want to have social interactions, and you're actually able to do those things. You need to live that kind of life. And when I went through this period of time with our son being sick and us having to, be somewhere else for 6 months, it really didn't hit me in the first 2 to 3 weeks. It didn't hit me for probably, a good month, 2 months down the road. I thought, boy, I need more. I miss my work. I miss the sense of purpose and freedom that I get out of helping people every single day. And so I would encourage you to look at this more like, let's take a 6-month sabbatical and see what that feels like and design your perfect retirement before you actually step into it. We talk about all these things in my book, Job Optional. And right now we want to give you a special offer. I think right now there's a lot of folks sitting at home. Maybe you're reading a lot of books.
Yeah,
and this is a good time to get educated. I don't think there's a better time to get educated about your finances than during times of stress or anxiety. So if you're feeling that, our purpose here is to help as many others as possible achieve job optional status, elevate your purpose, create more meaning in your life. This is why I wrote the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Job Optional. In it, you're going to discover a step-by-step guide to planning your retirement. And given what's going on in the world today, I believe it's exactly what the doctor ordered. And we want to help as many people as we can. So we're giving it away to the next 10 radio callers who call right now at 866-482-9559. Complimentary copy of my book, Job Optional, no cost, no obligation, 866-482-9559. We'll be right back after the short break with questions from you.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weed, joining me, my good friend, Marshall Johnson, to do some questions that we've got here from you. We just got done talking about what's on our mind. However, now it's time to figure out what's on your mind. And if you have questions, just go to retirewithpurpose.com. On the bottom right-hand corner of that screen, it says, Ask Casey a question. Type it in. We'll get you an answer. Our first question today comes from Tammy in Granger, Indiana. And Tammy says, I've seen posts stating, use your stimulus check to buy American and visit small businesses. Are there targeted businesses that should be considered first on the list?
Tammy, I look at that and I go, well, what small businesses do I frequent that I don't want to live without? I mean, we're talking about 95% plus of this country, the businesses are small businesses. But think of your life and your family's life. I know, Casey, for us here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, for my son, if he didn't have Coney Island, I don't know what we'd do. So we've been supporting Jim over there, my buddy Jim over at Coney Island. We were in there Saturday, kind of asking him how things were going. But these institutions that we just couldn't imagine live without, those are the ones that I would support.
Yeah, exactly. And we've been doing a lot of that ourselves. We really love cold pressed juices. And so we've been hitting up Juice Jar.
Yeah.
Until they shut down, we were going there, about every day to try to make sure that when things did open back up, we'd be able to go in there and I don't even know how to pronounce it yet. Acai bowls,
right.
bowls.
Acai. I think you had it right the first time.
And I think it's those, right now, restaurants have been hit very hard. Bars have been hit very hard. And I want to look at those bars and restaurants that I love the most.
Yeah.
The coffee shops I love the most. If it's Mocha Lounge, if it's Tui's Winery, and food trucks. We've been the food trucks. They got hit very, very hard throughout this period of time. However, you can still order food from them. And people don't know that, but you can contact these food trucks. We had Mercado this past week. We had them come in, and Mercadito come in and do a little Cinco de Mayo, for the team.
The office.
We just catered in some food from them. And these businesses are just so thankful right now because they desperately need it. 800 Degrees. Matt Rogers helped us out. We catered in some food from them. I'm a big foodie, so patronizing the restaurants is important to me because the local restaurants are something that I really, really enjoy.
Absolutely. Great question, Tammy. Next up, we've got Floyd in Elkhart, Indiana. Floyd says, is it required to sign up for Medicare 3 months before your birthday month when turning 65?
Yeah, well, it's not required.
It's not
during
required.
that period of time.
They're not going to force you.
Yeah, you actually have the 3 months before your birthday, the month of your birthday, the 3 months following your birthday.
So you got 7 months. You get this window of 7 months.
Yeah, so you've got a pretty good window there, but you do want to make sure you take some action during that period of time because you could face penalties otherwise. If you're still employed, I would encourage you to go back, check out our episode number 115, which really walks us through not just how to deal with Medicare if you're going to continue to work past age 65, but also helps you better understand Medicare as a whole, how it operates, when to sign up, how to sign up, et cetera. That was I think that was probably one of our most beneficial episodes that we ever did around healthcare and Medicare. However, if you're also interested in diving a little bit deeper, we've got an hour-long interview on the Retire with Purpose podcast with Dr. Katie Vitova, who's a registered nurse, PhD in healthcare economics, and she is a fee-only Medicare provider. So she provides a deep dive into the understanding of Medicare itself.
I've never been asked that question. I mean, most people just can't wait till they're 65 so they can file for Medicare. But I guess, those that are still working, you just have to be really careful because don't ignore it, because if you miss this initial window, it's a 10% penalty every year.
Yeah, and we're talking a permanent penalty.
Permanent penalty. So it's a big deal.
If you're with a large employer, 20 or more employees, then you're good, right? With a large employer, you have the benefit of staying on the employer's plan, and quite often, that's a good thing. You should do that because usually large employers have pretty good benefit packages, and your costs are actually going to be lower with the employer's plan than they would on Medicare. And I think that's something that many miss out on. They underestimate the cost of Medicare, thinking, I've heard it from people, well, I'll just be good when I get to Medicare. We take a look at what's actually coming out of their paycheck every month, and it's not a whole lot different than their Medicare costs once we throw in Part B, once we throw in their drug plan, once we throw in supplemental plan, then they find that, okay, it's not free, right? There is a fairly substantial cost to being on Medicare.
Well, and along those same lines, I mean, Part A is something that most people don't pay for. So even if you are still working, you may still want to file for Part A, and then your employer plan becomes, your supplemental, your Part B. You don't have to go that route. So you get an extension on that window until you're no longer working. So Floyd, check out that Dr. Katie Vitova podcast. That's one you'll get a lot of.
And I'll say, if you're with a smaller employer, you're going to sign up for Medicare, and you're probably better off actually signing up for Medicare, because most smaller employers don't cover nearly the cost. They don't have the same benefit packages as a larger employer.
Yep. Absolutely. Next up, we've got Luann in Fort Wayne. Luann says, with the current market crash, is it a good idea to automatically rebalance an account several times a week? In parentheses, she says, selling really deflated funds and buying other ones, especially when just a few funds are bought multiple times. I've read that it's best to sit tight and trust that your portfolio is ready to ride out the storm. It seems like every time they do it, I lose even more money by rebalancing.
Yeah, well, Luann, I would encourage you to think about... It really depends on what your strategy is, what your goals are. If you're just going to sit tight and ride it out, then that probably means you have a pretty high risk tolerance, right? You're somebody that can ride this sucker all the way down, ride it back up. You're used to that roller coaster ride, so you can trust it. You can wait. And some of our, per se in-house, we have hundreds of portfolios, separately managed accounts that we can choose from. The ones that are only rebalancing, say once a year, twice a year, very low touch, very low rebalancing, very low turnover, those are built for longer term investors. Right. Those are built to not rebalance as often, because we don't mind getting a little out of line with your risk tolerance, because you have the tolerance to get out of line with your risk tolerance.
Yep.
Now,
and that's a strategic asset allocation strategy.
Yeah, and then you could have more of a dynamic or a tactical approach, and those types of approaches are typically meant for individuals that don't have that same risk tolerance. So rebalancing is really, it's keeping you in line with your portfolio. It's not changing your portfolio. It's actually keeping your portfolio in line with your risk tolerance. So
that's a good point. I think that gets lost on a lot of people, because they see, like she may be doing, she's looking at her statement and saying, well, my stocks are down. Like in March, my stocks were down 30%. So if that was 60% of her portfolio, now that really just adjusted things, because her bonds probably grew over that period of time. So it's really throwing you off. So if you just let it ride.
Yeah, your portfolio is no longer your portfolio when we see a market that's down 30% in a matter of really days, right? If we see a market that's going down that quickly, it does make sense to rebalance to keep you in line with your original risk tolerance. You said, I want to be a moderately aggressive investor. Now the market's down 30%, and you find that, well, this is now a moderately conservative portfolio. We need to rebalance and get back in line with your risk tolerance, with the type of allocation that you wanted to have in the first place. So you should be rebalancing. And I also think this is a bit of a market timing question where we have to, I always think back to Dr. Daniel Crosby's quote. This one will probably never leave me. It's always stuck into my head at this point. We interviewed him. He's one of the top behavioral finance experts in the country. He's also one of the most well-known asset managers in the country. We interviewed him on the Retire with Purpose podcast. And during our interview, the market's down around 30%. I said, hey, Dan, I know you're getting asked this a lot. He's on TV all the time. Is this the time to buy? What are you telling your clients? He said, if someone's telling you what the market's going to do over the next 6 months, 12 months, then they're just trying to sell you something. Nobody knows what the market's going to do over the short term. But I can tell you, when the market's down 20%, the market's down 30%, we're either going to have really good or excellent returns over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
However, it may get much worse before it gets better, or it may be the end of it and the market rebounds. We can't time that in the short term, but we have to take advantage of the opportunities we have when we find an opportunity, because we can't predict the next 6 months. We can't predict the next 30 days, but we can predict over the long term. I think we get closer to the ability to very accurately predict over a 10, 20, 30 year period what the market might do, or what an individual individual company might look like down the road if it's a good buy or not. This is the way Warren Buffett buys stocks.
He goes,
is this a good company? I don't care what the market's doing, what the economy is doing today. Is this a good company? Is this a good price? We buy it.
Yeah, in knowing your strategy and knowing what you're trying to accomplish, I think was key there. I mean, if you're trading the market, listen, every day is a new day. You could be trading every day, but it sounds like having a plan where you've segmented your risk and you have a strategy or you've got a portfolio manager that's doing something that's in line with your motivation and what you're trying to create is ultimately the most important thing there. And whether they're buying or selling, you need to know that the risk tolerance, it doesn't matter. You need to know that the risk number is in line with your goals and your objectives. And how much risk do you need to take, Casey? That's one thing we're always talking about.
When it sounds to me like this someone that doesn't want to lose money, right? And sees a portfolio loss as a loss, a permanent loss. Mm-hmm. If that's your view, then maybe it's time to take a more conservative approach. Maybe it's time to take a more defensive approach. And maybe you decide, I don't want to experience this anymore. Why don't we go ahead and allocate some of that additional fixed income rather than reallocating it over to equities? Why don't we take a portion of that and set it aside and create a guaranteed income stream we can't outlive? And in order to do that, you need to know what all your options are. And I think right now is the best time to get educated about your finances. I think the best time to do that is during times of stress, during times of anxiety. If you've got feelings like Luann here, let's get an education and play some defense and make sure we're making the best options moving forward. Our purpose here is to help as many others as possible achieve job optional status to elevate your purpose, create more meaning in your life. But you can't do that if you're stressed out and if you have anxiety at the top of your mind. This is why I wrote the Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Job Optional. In it, you will discover a step-by-step guide to planning your retirement. And given what's going on in the world today, I believe it's just what the doctor ordered, and we want to help as many people as we can. So today, we're going to be giving it away to the next 10 radio callers who call in right now, 866-482-9559. We'll send you a complimentary copy of my best-selling book, Job Optional, no obligation, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. We've got John O'Leary coming up next. If you don't know anything about John O'Leary, at the age of 9, John was caught in fire by an explosion that burned 100% of his body. You may have read one of his #1 New York Times best-selling books. He is an amazing human being. You're going to want to hear this.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weed. Joining me, my good friend, co-host, Marshall Johnson, and another very, very, very special guest. We have John O'Leary. John O'Leary, if you haven't heard of John O'Leary, if you don't know who John O'Leary is, then you need to get on board. Marshall and I had the opportunity to originally see John speak from the stage about a year and a half ago.
Right.
And we were sitting in the audience watching John, and I'm wiping a tear away from my eye. I look over at Marshall. His shirt's soaked.
Yeah, just bawling like a little baby. I mean, the way that John talks and is telling his story, I mean, if you have kids and families, it's powerful.
He's an incredible human being, and someone I was so excited to have share with us mostly about his new book on the Retire with Purpose podcast. This is going to be pre-release, so you can't get this on the podcast app yet. However, we did the interview on Facebook Live. The video is still on our Howard Bailey Financial Facebook page, so check it out, like it, and we're also taking a good majority of our podcast interviews live long before they're going to hit the podcast. You have the opportunity to engage with our guests as well. All you have to do is check out the Facebook page, and you'll be able to engage right there. This is going to be episode number 134, and John's new book is called In Awe. So his previous book, On Fire, was #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. I know this one will be no exception. Believe it or not, so John shared with me that his business's profits are down 94% year to date.
Because he's a public speaker, right? He's doing lots of speaking engagements.
Right.
All those things are canceled.
He decided that he was going to donate all of the pre-sale book sales as well as the first, I think, week, maybe 2 weeks of book sales as well to Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Awesome.
This is the kind of guy he is. And so we decided to go in on the deal with him. And we said, hey, why don't we give away a bunch of your books? So we're going to give away a bunch of his books signed. So this is the only place you're going to get a signed copy of the book, In Awe. This book is all about reclaiming childlike joy to live your best life at any age. Just give us a call right now. We got a box of the books. We'll send them out till they're gone. 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. And now we're going to share with you a few clips from the interview. And right off the top, given that we've experienced some adversity over the last couple of months, to say the least, I wanted to know, how do we find inspiration in times of adversity? This is what John had to say.
One is with the vision of where you want to go. I think we give way too much credibility and attention to the news of the day. And I'm not saying that as a political commentary. Right now, the Republicans are nodding their heads saying those darn liberals, and the liberals are nodding their heads saying that darn Trump. So I'm not being political here. I'm just being factual. They are paid to share fear and tell you to stick around for the 2 minutes of commercials that they're selling you so that you will pay attention to the next round of fear that they're sending your way. And this is nothing new. Harvard did a study on this, and back in 2018, when stock market was at all-time high, unemployment at all-time low, 94.5% of news stories were negative. So if you think it's just the COVID-19, that's why it's so bad. Bull, man. This has been going on not only for years, but decades and generations. There's nothing new under the sun. That's a 2,700-year-old quote, and it still plays today. Nothing new under the sun. So the media just keeps stirring the pot of negativity and death. So number one, stop paying attention to that. Start looking forward to where you still can go. The foundation of your life remains firm. You live, for the majority of us, in the freest society in the history of the world. Anywhere that your listeners are tuning in from today, whether it's Australia, England, Ireland, Canada, just about anywhere else in the world, including our own backyard of the United States, the foundation is firm. So where do you want to go? Number one is vision. Secondly, getting present with the moment. When we are living with fear, you're not living with a rational belief of what's happening right now. You're living with what might happen next.
Ooh. Yeah, exactly. And that is, what happens next. And we use this language quite a bit in our planning process because, if we put together the right financial framework, the right plan, we no longer have to worry about what's next. We don't have to worry about what's next in the stock market, what's next with inflation or taxes in Washington. We get to live right now. And that's what life's about. Life's not going on 10 years from now. Life's going on today, right now. And we have to define what our purpose is in order to create the fullest life possible. And in having this discussion with John O'Leary, I wanted to ask, maybe we define our purpose today. Maybe we defined it when we were 20, 30, 40. How does that evolve throughout life? How should we revisit it as our life progresses?
We're always hopefully becoming far better, wiser versions of ourselves. And likewise, our meaning and our purpose ought to change a bit with it. So I know you work with individuals and organizations, help them set goals on where they ultimately want to go. You ought to revisit those probably every 6 to 12 months. Yeah. And say, gosh, is that still what retirement looks like for you? Mm-hmm. You want to retire at 49? You said, well, now you're 53. Are you sure you still want to retire at 49? Because that's 4 years ago. You said you wanted to retire at 65 with X amount of dollars. Is that still what it looks like? And so we ought to be always looking deeply in the mirror, not only to add makeup and fix our hair, but to really discover who we really are and what ultimately really matters.
Yeah, I think far too often we delay this discussion until far too long in life. And many times when we're sitting down with a family and we ask them, hey, how do you find your purpose? Where do you find meaning in life? Yeah, there's kind of a look of confusion or a look of, I haven't been asked that, or I haven't even thought about that in years. Can we just move on to the financial stuff?
Yeah. Or I'm so guarded with my emotions, I'm never going to give you a true answer right now. You look at me, this is a hard question, but I think it's one that we're still trying to develop. And how do we define that purpose is a good question.
And I think, as John says, we always need to revisit this. We need to continue to think about it. It's always going to be evolving. We're always going to be growing. But what if you're struggling today? This is how John helps those struggling with defining their purpose today.
So I only have one question to get me down there, but to lead into it, I would always empathize and say, you know what, you are not alone. The vast majority of people have no purpose. They have drive maybe for something, but frequently once they get there, they realize, wow, that wasn't it. So what's next? What's the next summit? Let's keep going, people. Maybe if it's more followers on Facebook, maybe if it's more dollars in the bank account, maybe that's what's driving me. And then they get both and dang, that's hollow too. So they're not alone. Begin with compassion and grace, not only for them, but also for all of us. And then the one question I think guides you toward discovering purpose is you ask the question, who cares? And you begin the answer. So who cares? Why do you care about this? And the answer begins with, I choose to thrive because.
And to me, when I hear that, who cares? I know he's directing that question in a way that you say, well, my purpose is to write books, whatever it might be. And you might, well, who cares?
Yeah.
And it's about someone else. I think that's what I hear in that, is that we're all human beings, and the biggest purpose, that the highest level of meaning we can create in our life is going to come from someone else.
Yeah.
It's going to come from creating value in someone else's life. That's what's going to be the biggest reward. That's what I hear. And we just have to look back throughout our lives and go, how have I created value in life for others? How have I created value in life for others? When I'm in a meeting, when I'm talking to them, when I'm creating something for them, maybe we're doing the accounting for them, whatever it is, how have I created the biggest value in this world for others? And we can carry that into retirement, whatever your career was.
Yeah, in people that are stuck in a dark place are often thinking, well, who cares? It's a different way of saying that, like, oh, who cares if I do this or I don't do this? And he's flipping that language to say, who cares? Who can you impact? Who cares?
And if you're wondering why we have a speaker like John O'Leary, an author like John O'Leary on the podcast, on this Retire with Purpose financial shows, you're looking at it, a big part of the reason is what we've experienced with families that we worked with before we started focusing on purpose before planning. We saw many suffer from depression in retirement, and studies show that there's an increase in the risk of clinical depression in retirement of 60% as you make that transition into retirement. And I had to ask John to address that. Why do you believe that we see such a higher rate of depression in retirement?
That is behavior-based depression. That is when our whole life was a sprint. We were doing it. We were rocking. We would play golf on Thursdays and toast how great we were on Friday afternoons. And now we don't have that. And now my life has lost meaning. That's not clinical depression. That's because, damn, this is what I signed up for. This wasn't the life I longed for. Now, where's my meaning? And so for those folks, it's a different deal. I think I would remind them that you do not have to be defined negatively by retirement. You don't have to wake up at 10 o'clock, read the morning news. It's already behind us, by the way. It's looking back at what happened yesterday. You don't have to live that life. You don't have to go to coffee every single day and boredly ask the question, well, what should we do?
If you enjoyed this discussion, go back, check out the podcast episode. It'll be podcast episode number 134 on the Retire with Purpose podcast. You can check that out at retirewithpurpose.com. Go ahead and subscribe in your podcast app. If you like the Facebook page, you'll also get early access to the full-length interview with John O'Leary. And if you're a reader, we've got a special offer for you today. We partnered up with John to offer his newest book, In Awe, which was just released this past week. The book's all about reclaiming childlike joy to live your best life at any age, full of exploration, curiosity, and wonder. These are the things I see in my kids, every day.
Yeah.
And John generously sent a box of these books to us, and we're going to be giving them away until they're all gone. And all of the proceeds are going to Big Brothers Big Sisters. So we're buying the books, we're giving them to you. All those proceeds for the cost of the book are going to be going to charity. and we're going to have all the books signed by John O'Leary as well going out to you. This is the only place you're going to find that offer. Call now at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559 to claim your complimentary copy of John O'Leary's In Awe. I know it's going to be at the number one, the tippy top of the New York Times bestseller list in no time, and I can't wait to get you a copy. Now it's our turn to ask you a question. This is our question of the day. And our question of the day is this: what percentage of Americans say they have sacrificed or are sacrificing their own retirement savings in order to help their adult children financially? 30%, 50, 20, 60%? We'll have the answer when we come back.
You're listening to Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson. This is Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson.
Welcome back to Retire with Purpose, the science of retiring with confidence, the art of living with purpose. This is your host, Casey Weed. Joining me, my good friend and co-host, Marshall Johnson, to answer our question of the day. If you didn't catch it before the break, it is this: what percentage of Americans say they've sacrificed or are sacrificing their own retirement savings in order to help their adult children financially? Is that 20%, 30, 50, or all the way up to 60%? Marshall?
The answer is 50, a whopping 50%.
And this quote, this stat, it comes from one of our past weekend reading articles, actually this past Friday, and it was talking about some of the biggest concerns, retirement fears of Americans. And 50% of Americans say they've sacrificed or are sacrificing their own retirement in order to help their adult children financially. And I think the author of that article gave up some good advice. He said, it doesn't do you or them any good if you sacrifice your retirement for them. And I think there's some depth in that particular sentence right there, because it's not doing you any good because, well, you just sacrifice your retirement, right? You've just prolonged your retirement date. You've had to make sacrifices that could ultimately cost you and them. So why doesn't do them any good? I think it doesn't do them any good in twofold. And again, I can't tell you how to raise your kids. This is just my personal opinion. One, it doesn't do them any good if you sacrifice your retirement for them. What if this means that now you're going to run out of money earlier and ultimately they're going to be taking care of you on the back end? What if this means you can't cover your healthcare expenses and retirement, and now the kids have to step in and assist with those things? And I don't know that it necessarily helps them. And I think you can wrap your head around this quite often by just thinking through the struggles you had in your financial life. Yeah. And when no one was there to help you, what did you do? You got bloody-eyed, right? You got down there. You did what was necessary. You got to work. You did the hard work. No one picked you up. No one rescued you. And that's why you are successful today, because you had to live through those difficult times. And I know it's hard. Just the other day, we just taught our oldest son to ride his bike. So he's 5 years old. We get to take one training wheel off. We get the other training wheel off. And
wait, you took one off and not the other?
You take one off and have him go in circles one direction, take the other one off, have him go in the other direction.
All right.
And then he falls, right? He falls pretty bad. And he skinned up his leg, his knee, and I just stood there and said, "Get up." And my wife standing there, she said, "Get up, Calvin, it's all right." And you know how bad you want to go over and pick him up, give him a hug, kiss his knee, but that's not going to help build that bravery for him to know it's okay. I can skin my knee and I can give up. That's what builds real confidence, in my opinion.
Yeah, working hard and teaching your kids to work hard, as I think is really important, making sure they got skin in the game. But this is a problem.
And skin on the asphalt.
Yeah, skin on the asphalt. But, this is a real problem. We counsel families each and every week that are having to support kids. And it's fine if it's a one-time thing and somebody got divorced and they really need help, just a little stimulus check, a family stimulus check. But if it's another thing, if they're still on the payroll, and the problem is so many baby boomers are in this sandwich generation where they're taking care of aging parents and they've got adult children that still need help. Geez, there's not enough resources to go around for a lot of families.
Retirement's changing. And that was what another one of our weekend reading articles was about this past Friday. If you don't know what weekend reading is, it's a sample of 4 articles of the latest in retirement trends, things that are happening in the retirement realm. Reading these articles, reading my commentary with these articles are designed to help you make better decisions during your retirement. We send it out every Friday. All you have to do is go to retirewithpurpose.com and scroll on down, weekend reading, get you signed up today, first name and email. And we also, we think this is such a powerful article that we went into depth around this article on the Retire with Purpose podcast. That'll be episode number 130. So hop on the podcast app, look up Retire with Purpose, or just go to retirewithpurpose.com. Check us out on YouTube, and you'll be able to hear this article from Forbes titled Retirement or a Third Act, What Will You Choose?
I love it. The article, Casey, kicks off with a question that we often ask anytime we're doing public speaking. We often ask the room, what does retirement mean to you?
This is, usually podcasters have a kind of philosophical question that they like to wrap up an interview with. And this is the one that I almost always use is, what does retirement mean to you? Because it's interesting,
fascinating,
the vast, array of definitions the individuals have today around retirement. It's different today. I truly believe it's different. And I think just the title of the article shares that with us. It says third act. Third act, I've heard it called second act. Nancy Collimer was on the podcast talking about it as the second act. And I like thinking of it as a third act. I think that makes a lot of sense. You've gotten through this.
Was childhood the first act?
Yeah, I'm thinking childhood, youth, and then family, and then you're transitioning into retirement. I get it. My favorite might be Jamie Hopkins' definition. Jamie Hopkins' title. He was also one of our podcast guests. His title of his book was Rewirement. And
that's good.
I like that because I think when we step into retirement, today we have to rewire our thinking about retirement and rewire our lives.
Yeah, Mitch Anthony, another guy, the new retire mentality. I mean, I think it's changing, right? I mean, people used to be in retirement for 5 or 7 years. Now we're talking about 30, potentially 40 years.
There was a really interesting stat shared here. The projected age, so this is about the Supreme Court, the projected age when a justice will leave the Supreme Court is now expected to be around 83. Whew. 83 years old. That's a 10-year increase from the 50s.
It's kind of funny. It's kind of like the old tribes, right? Like the elders. I mean, those are kind of our elders. They're going to be impacting the future generations for years to come.
My grandfather, Ralph Bailey, he was superintendent at 86, right? I don't know.
I want that knowledge.
I don't know if there's any other superintendent, maybe in the country that was still a superintendent at age 86, but he's living his best life. He put comments on our Facebook posts all the time at Howard Bailey, and he talks about this.
His experience, his relevance, his impact on society, he can do that with all of his wealth of knowledge,
Yeah. Well, he listened to our John O'Leary interview and he posted on it. And he watched it on Facebook Live and said, "This is what I've been doing." It was validating.
I was going to say that's impressive.
He's been living retirement his whole life. It's been focused on helping individuals his whole life. His whole life has been around helping others, and that's what John O'Leary's mission is. And he said, "Don't wait until you're retired to volunteer. Don't wait until you got enough money to give back."
Well, and this article goes on about how important it is to be intentional and strategic about this new phase of your life. Creating goals, strategies for your third act helps set the course for and articulate your commitments as well as foster a sense of fulfillment. I think that's the big thing.
Well, and after I read this article, I invited the author of the article to come be interviewed on the podcast. So she'll be on the podcast as well very soon, because what she did with it, I think, was very interesting. When she turned 50, she set out on a mission to interview retirees, and not just retirees, but she was looking for individuals that were over 75, and she interviewed 37 of these individuals, mostly professionals, both women, men, CEOs, publishers of newspapers, realtors, retail execs, entrepreneurs, lawyers, accountants, etc.
Different walks of life.
You learn a massive amount of information when you do something like this, and a couple of the answers were interesting. One, the common one, was, "Well, I would have managed my finances better for retirement." That's probably the vast majority of Americans. We don't think about planning for retirement until it's too late.
Sure.
But I think the more interesting one here is, "I wouldn't have retired so soon. 65 was way too early." Now, I think that 65 wasn't too early. It could have been 55. It was, they didn't bring that passion and drive and experience they had that they loved while they were working into retirement with them and just leave all the garbage behind. They just dropped it and moved on to uncharted territory.
Yeah, they retired from something, not to something.
Exactly. And she offers some great questions. She offers up 10 questions
really
that might help you start thinking a little differently about retirement retirement and start thinking about your purpose in retirement. And some of these were just, they seem so common sense, but we overlook these things. Number one on the list is, what has made you happy over the years? A new challenge, interesting work, money, making a contribution to society. What was it that's brought happiness to your life thus far? And
I think that's a great question to ask anybody, right? Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in the day-to-day movements that we kind of lose sight of, why are we doing what we're doing? What makes us happy? And I'm sure as life progresses, time, what makes you happy at different phases of your life is very different.
Yeah.
Right now, my days, what makes me happy is playing baseball with my son and coaching baseball. I know there's going to come a day when that's not going to be around.
Yeah, and I love skiing with our kids. I one of the things that's brought us a ton of happiness is, we got a little vacation rental up in Boyne Mountain that, we rent, we break even, and we get to use it to ski in. And it's one of my lifelong dreams to have, that experience with our family. And that brings us so much happiness. And golf, hunting, just building and creating new things. If I just stopped building, if I just stopped creating, if I stopped growing personally, I don't know where I'd be today.
Yeah, you'd be at a loss. Number 2, she says, what part of your life makes you happy today? Freedom, flexibility, being close to the people you love, feeling productive, being relevant. What is it, etc.?
Yeah, and to me, I like organization. I like productivity. Those things bring me a lot of happiness.
Efficiency.
Today.
You like efficiency.
And I like flexibility. I like to be able to create my own schedule. There's just so many great questions in here. How can you manage your finances better in order to give you flexibility in your third act? Do you want to earn an income, volunteer, or both? What are you passionate about? And what have you longed to have time to do, etc.? And then there's these 3 tips. So there's 3 tips to help you explore those possibilities after you've laid them out.
Yeah, number 1, stop overthinking. Geez, this one hit hard for me. I'm an analyst. I want to analyze everything, upward, downward, backwards, forwards. This is me.
Yeah, I like to get out of my comfort zone. This talks about moving outside your comfort zone. Try something new. And for me, every year I like to try new things. This year I set out on a CrossFit adventure. I've always, kind of poo-pooed CrossFit and said, you shouldn't do that. But I said, I shouldn't talk bad about it until I try it.
Yep.
So I said, I'm going to do CrossFit 2 days a week. And now it's evolved into 3 days a week. And I'm starting to embrace it. My knees hurt a little bit, but I'm embracing it.
Yeah. Number 2, stay open-minded and look for opportunities to say yes.
Yeah, that's something that John O'Leary talks a lot about in his book, In Awe. Over time, we become more closed-minded. As kids, we're so open-minded. Anything's possible.
Anything's possible from moment to moment, right?
And over time, we kind of get beat up by our teachers, the school system,
Discipline,
our parents.
discipline.
And I just embrace those questions of why, with our kids. Just embrace the why. They say why, I'm going to have a very long and in-depth explanation and conversation, if possible, around whatever the why is. Quite often, it falls on deaf ears, and they'll go, okay, let's move on to the next thing. But we want to encourage the why.
Yeah, speak your truth. And then number 3, find your role models. Geez, if I found a role model in the last 12 months, it was probably John O'Leary. Great podcast.
Yeah, to me, top of that list, John Vroman, who started Front Row Dads, Brad Johnson, a great friend and mentor of mine, Dan Sullivan as a business coach. I've got so many mentors, and I think we need to actively seek out good mentors. They don't have to be your best friend. You don't even have to talk to them that regularly, but it has to be someone that you look up to, that you can connect with. If you want to hear this full-length conversation, check it out, Retire with Purpose podcast. You can go to retirewithpurpose.com to get a link to this article on episode number 130 in the show notes. I think one of the things that could really help you really capture that open-mindedness, regain that open-mindedness, stop overthinking, just recapturing some of that childlike wonder is taking advantage of our special offer today. We partnered with John O'Leary. John O'Leary, #1 best-selling author of On Fire. His newest book is titled In Awe. We're going to give it away today. This book's all about reclaiming childlike joy to live your best life at any age, full of exploration, curiosity, wonder. John so generously sent us a box of these books signed, and we're going to be giving them away until they're gone. So call right now and get your copy, 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559. John is donating all the proceeds from the sale of this book to Big Brothers Big Sister. In the pre-sale, it was just released this past week, and so in the first week, he's also going to be giving them away. So We are going to be buying these books from John. He's going to be giving the money away, so it's going to go to a good cause. Give us a call, 866-482-9559. We'll catch you right back here next week.
You've been listening to Retire with Purpose, featuring Howard Bailey Financial's Casey Weed and Marshall Johnson. Investment advisory services may be offered through Howard Bailey Securities, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, Inc. owns the certification marked CFP and Certified Financial Planner in the U.S., which it awards to individuals who successfully complete CFP Board's initial and ongoing certification requirements. Howard Bailey Financial is a registered trademark of Howard Bailey Financial. All rights reserved. Information is not intended to provide specific legal or tax advice. Howard Bailey Financial nor its advisors are qualified to give tax or legal advice. You are encouraged to consult with your tax or legal professional for guidance on your individual situation. This radio show is a paid placement.